All right. First of all, I want to thank everybody for, is that too loud? No? Sounds loud to me. I want to thank everybody for coming. I'm going to give you a heads up right on the front side of this. I've got a 45-minute lecture I'm going to give you in 20 minutes. So we're going to give you the other 20 if you come by the booth. All right? So what I've done is my talk is about mapping, grading, distortions, and trimming. Can they all come together? For the last 5-6 years, we've had multiple people present on some sort of hoof mapping. There's multiple different maps out there. And 2 years ago, I presented on grading distortions, reading tissue. And so today I want to know if it can all come together. So I'm going to show you 2 feet, one of which is the same foot. That's a before and after trim. What I've done in this presentation oftentimes is I've made an overlay. So just so everybody understands what I'm talking about, I lined up the heel bulbs, the frog, and this fracture in the bar, and then made it transparent so that they're overlaid, okay? Really quick, because there's multiple different types of mapping, I'm just gonna go over the ELPO map. It's the one I'm most familiar with. First thing we look at is the dimple in the back of the central sulcus. Okay. The second thing we look at is the apex of the central sulcus. The reason for that is the length of the central sulcus doubled gives us the true apex of our frog. Right. From finding the true apex of the frog on a size aught to a size or small 2, about 1 inch back, we find and make a mark. Okay. The second way that we look, that's one of the marks that we make for the widest part of the foot. The second mark that we look at and mark is where the bar termination is. So we look at where the lamina terminates in the bar. If those two line up, we'll make a mark. That's the widest part of the foot. From there, on the same size foot, about 1 3/4 inches forward, we make a mark for the tip of P3. Okay, so is the map correct? Well, by cutting that foot in half, leaving the marks on the foot, we check it. In this particular case, that is right where the tip of P3 is, okay? And the widest part of the foot oftentimes will fall within the rotational surface of the coffin joint. It doesn't always line up with the center of rotation. It doesn't always line up with the center of articulation, but it does seem to always fall within the rotational surface of the coffin joint. So one of the most important things that's come from mapping, because there's been a lot of people who've talked about mapping, is our ability to improve how we assess hoof capsule distortions and overgrowth. I thought this was funny. I didn't name it horn, someone else did. But what we're talking about is reading horny tissue, okay? And understanding how the hoof grows. So I played this animation 2 years ago. I'm gonna play it again just to revisit it and so everybody understands what we're talking about. Oftentimes and for years, we're trying to align the hoof pastern axis. We're trying to align the phalanges and look at those sorts of things, okay? Sometimes we'll leave the heel and trim the toe to stand them up or to get that pastern more correct. Now, if the foot grew straight up and down, that would make a lot of sense, okay? But one of the biggest issues that we have and one of the biggest struggles we have is the way in the direction that the horn grows. So if you watch this animation, you can see a few things. One, the heel start to migrate forward, okay, as well as the toe. And at the same time, oftentimes there starts to become a bulge in the coronet band. Okay. From the solar view, now there's a mark at the widest part of the foot, and one of the things that has helped us the most is to be able to start separating how the foot distorts front and back. In the front half of the foot, it goes forward and outwards. In the back half of the foot, it generally goes forward and inwards. So oftentimes your heels are going forwards and collapsing. If you watch this animation, we'll do it once, watch the back half. You can see as the foot starts to grow, the heels come forward and will generally start to turn inward, okay? Now, if we go back and we look at its toe, the toe generally starts to go forward and come outward. So from this, the ELPO has been able to develop a hoof evaluation protocol. In that, we grade 4 of the structures in the bottom of the foot. We grade the frog, the heels, the bars, and the toe. Okay? So right away, we're gonna go into this untrimmed foot and just explain, first thing, how we grade the frog. The 3 things that we grade on the frog is the health of the central sulcus, okay? Whether or not that central sulcus is laid over or deep or diseased. The frog length and the frog toe, or I'm sorry, the frog length and the frog width. So How we do that is we look at the frog length. We take the measurement of the central sulcus, and we found by doing multiple dissections at the corium level, the length of the central sulcus doubled is the true apex of the frog. We will double that forward. If that is the case, that is a 0. The frog length is a 0. Okay? We use the central sulcus for the frog width as well. So you can see that the frog there on that animation is much wider than the length of the central sulcus, and we go plus 1/4 of an inch. Okay. So obviously, like I said before, that frog is a 0. Once the frog starts to stretch and grow and comes beyond that, it starts to go up in grade. That would be a 1. Okay? And we use the central sulcus as our guide to keep helping us with this. So 25% of the central sulcus greater than that is now a 2, 50% is a 3, okay? 60% is, or 75% is a 4, and if it's 100% or 3 times the length of the central sulcus, that's a 5 frog, and you can see that in some severely distorted cases. So this particular frog grade, very simply, is a 0, okay? The frog width is also a 0, but the central sulcus is a 1. You can see the back of it's got a tag that's kind of folded over. Once I trim that, it opens up and it turns into a 0. Second thing we're going to look at is grading the heels, okay? And what we're talking about is the last weight-bearing surface of the heels. You can see I put 2 marks where those heels are currently. Now, as I start the overlay, you can see once the foot has been trimmed, where the heels have changed or migrated to, okay? Now, how we grade those heels, again, we're using the tissue of the central sulcus. That helps us not get carried away with different measurements, and we can grade each foot as an individual, which is key. Okay, so we take the length of the central sulcus. If the heels are ending from the back, 20% forward of the back of the dimple in the central sulcus, that's a 1. 40% is a 2, 50 or 60% is a 3, 80% is a 4, and if the heels are ending at the apex of the central sulcus or forward of that, it's a 5. Okay, so grading the heels after the trim, obviously they're a 0, but before the trim, you can see the medial heel was a 1. And the lateral heel is a 2, okay? So it's about starting to understand what the tissue is doing and reading the tissue in the foot. Grading the bars, what we're looking at is in the commissures along the side of the frog, the distance of the top of the frog and where the top of the frog ends away from the side of the frog. Now, we use 1/4 inch increments. Looks like it's a little bit hard for some of you to see that maybe. Once we get to a 1/2 inch, generally the top of the frog is about a 1/2 inch away from the edge of the frog for a 0. Everything beyond that, each 1/4 of an inch goes up in grade. These particular bars, the medial side or the right side is a 2, and so is the lateral side, but you can see that the lateral side is actually just a bit further. It's not quite a 3, it's still a 2, but there is a difference in the 2. As we do the overlay again and we take a look at the trimmed foot, you can see that now the bar on the right side or the medial bar is back to a 0, but the lateral bar is still a 1. All right, and this is where helping or understanding what the tissue is doing in the back of the foot will help us understand why I wasn't able to trim that back to a 0. Okay, when we look at it like this, you see the fracture in that bar. Don't forget that this bar on the left side, on the lateral heel there, was more forward. It was a grade 2 instead of a grade 1. When that occurs, okay, what you're seeing is that you can see the bar on the medial side has a nice even flow to it. The bar on the lateral side, though, has more of a kink. So as that heel starts to migrate forward, it causes pressure and bar compression, which generally starts to have a fracture, some sort of bruise or abscess. So fractures are usually one of the first indicators that either there's a medial-lateral imbalance in your heels, or that they're overgrown and putting too much pressure forward. Okay, so grading the toe length. We're looking at the back of the central sulcus and the dimple. We take the widest part of the foot and we're taking the measurement from the dimple to the widest part of the foot and doubling that. Now, in this particular case, you can see that on the untrimmed foot and on the trimmed foot, the distance of that is the same. Now, how that grade goes is once you've doubled it, we give it an extra 1/4 of an inch for the thickness of the wall. Okay? Every 1/4 of an inch after that, the grade goes up. You got a 1, 2, 3. So when you look at this, after that foot has been trimmed, the toe length is at a 0. What's interesting though is that the untrimmed foot, the toe is almost a 0. The difference of it is probably maybe an 1/8 of an inch, but it's just past that that puts it into the 1 position. All right? So here's the thing. Zeros are generally perimeter fit feet. And this is something that's probably been misconstrued a lot with either the ELPO or what people are trying to do with setting shoes back and those sorts of things. If you read the tissue and the foot is non-distorted and balanced, you don't need to be setting the shoe back. You don't need to be dubbing the toe off. It's about understanding and reading the tissue and what type of foot you have. So you can see this foot from a lateral view. It's a very nice foot. There's very minimal distortion and that foot didn't really need much but just basic trimming. Okay, before and after. That's before and after. Now, the second foot that I'm going to show you is an excessively long foot. And now I've only trimmed half of this foot so that I can help you guys see what we're talking about in using the mapping, grading distortions, and then trimming it. This is the same foot, it's just this is the view of the lateral side and that's the view of the medial side. The side that I trimmed today is the medial side. This is a straight view, a dorsal view. Okay, I'm going to go through the same process. We grade the frog by doubling the central sulcus. We'll make a mark. Okay, if the frog ended there, the length of it would be a 0. Okay, but it doesn't. The frog ends here. Okay. So it is the frog length is a 2, but also at the same time what happens is the frog starts to become narrowed. As it stretched, the buttress of the frog starts to become narrowed. So the buttress of the frog is also a 2, but the central sulcus is still a 0. It's not deep, it doesn't have a crevice, it's not diseased. Okay? When we look at that foot, when we actually grade the heels, you remember what the grading system is there. The lateral heel is a 4. Okay, so where that heel ends, the last weight-bearing surface of that is a 4. The medial side is a 3. It's almost a 5. Okay, the lateral one is almost a 5. Now, we grade the bars on this. The same thing goes, right? That's a 0, that's a 1. The lateral bar is a 3, and the medial bar is a 2. So everything on the lateral side is at least a grade higher. Grading the toe length. Where the dimple is, the widest part of the foot, doubling that, right? At our 1/4 of an inch, 0, 2, 3, 4. The toe length is at a 4, all right? Now, after grading it and mapping it, it was really easy for me to see a couple things that concerned me. One, there's a medial-lateral imbalance in the heels. Both of the heels are run forward. The second part, though, is that there's obviously an excessively long toe. Now, the biggest concern for me, though, is that my map told me that the tip of P3 is right there. Now, the reason why that's concerning to me is because that's right at the tip of the frog, and there is no protection underneath the tip of the pedal bone. And so I start to get nervous, and to be honest with you, when I was doing this, I questioned, am I correct? Is that really where the tip of the bone is? So, next step is exfoliating the sole, and because I've pointed out that where my mark is, I'm a little bit concerned about, I'm going to be very careful about trimming around the tip of the bone, okay? I'm not touching any of that. What I'm doing is exfoliating the sole at the sole wall junction. Now, once I've exfoliated the bar though, you can see I've also got some little bit of alarming stuff, and it looks like unhealthy bar tissue. So when I zoom in on that, hopefully you guys can see that. Once the bar's been laid over and folded for a period of time, it starts to become yellowed and oftentimes starts to bruise or abscess. And it's very difficult to see where the lamina terminates. This is an example of a healthy bar tissue. You can see on that side, the lamina is very clear and you can see where it ends, right? There's a big difference between the two. Now, next thing I'm going to do is trim the heel wall, or the heel and the wall height. Now I threw these slides in here because it's always interesting to me to see this last weight-bearing surface of the heel is just this section right here. And the moment you start to trim that, you can see the weight-bearing surface of the heel has a portion of the bar in it. Okay, so it increases the surface area that the horn tubules have to stand or bear weight. Now, That's before nip ring, and after nip ring, you can see exactly what I'm talking about, and it changes the position of where the heel is almost to a 0 position. As soon as I get done trimming it, you can see I drew some lines on it so it's a little bit more clear where the heel ends. Okay, and that's after rasping. The next thing I'm doing is assessing my wall thickness. Reason being is because that foot is excessively long, right? The toe length is long, but it's not that it's just flared. The wall thickness has actually gotten quite great. All right, before shaping the wall and after shaping the wall. I drew a line on this just so you could see what I'm talking about. Now, I haven't dressed the wall yet. I've just brought that wall surface in. This is what it looks like from the top. Once I've done that, I've got a couple slides here just to show you the thickness and how far back that is, okay? Because that actually looks like it's broken back as well. When I turn the foot this way or this direction, you can see what I'm talking about. You can see the surface area from front to back and how it's quite level, but you can also see how far or how thick that wall is, especially once I've turned it this direction, okay? So dressing the wall is going to change that quite significantly. I'm not talking about over-thinning the wall. I'm talking about trying to help the wall become more uniformed. All right, that's before and afters from the lateral view. Sorry, that's what it looks like with half of it trimmed and half of it not. All right, on this particular slide, I drew some dots to show you right where I had finished rasping the wall. When I zoom on that, you can see the thickness of that wall and how much that changes. Here's a lateral view of that as well. So when I get done, one of the things that I'm taking a look at is what the position of the heels were before and the relationship to the dorsal wall. When you look at it after it was trimmed, okay, they're almost parallel. So just by reading the tissue, we're able to unfold the foot and help that horn to be a little bit more healthy. Now, you remember, one of my concerns was, is that tip of P3 correct? And the reason being is because it doesn't look like it should be that far back. Now, I was careful trimming around that, so when you look at this, I want to explain to you that one, I was correct in my mark where the tip of P3 was, okay? So I trusted it, I went with it, it was a cadaver foot. So, you know, what's the worst that could happen? I made a mistake and I was wrong on a cadaver, but it wasn't. Now, the part about that was concerning to me is there isn't much protection under the tip of P3, okay? The distal border of P3 has no support in the center of it. The toe length was a 4, and I've only, just by following those guidelines, got the toe length back to a 2. So I have a couple things, right? Uniform wall thickness, I don't know if you guys can see that. The wall is uniformed all the way down. So it's not gonna help me to rasp that more and over-thin that wall. The second part of that is that not much protection under the tip of P3. The wall or the sole is extremely thin. So if I was to trim more from the bottom of the foot and the toe, right, to try to help that out, what you're gonna do is you're gonna be so close in the thinning of the sole that you're gonna cause pressure, right, and soreness, and oftentimes remodeling of the tip of the bone. And you didn't really gain very much from that. Even by trimming it this way, you didn't gain much from the toe. One of the things that I question often is, what if we rasp the toe from a different direction? Instead of going from the dorsal wall or cutting it from the bottom, what if we start to follow that tissue and you can see where the length is out here. It's not necessarily from the top and not necessarily from the bottom. So this would be a case where rolling the toe might be the thing to do, okay? Oops, sorry. You can see that before rolling the toe and after rolling the toe, how that changes it, but we still have some height. And this is a foot that most likely is going to need some sort of extra support, right? Whether it's a bar shoe, a pad, some sort of packing in the bottom of the foot through the center to help protect it and also help the bony column from not having distal descent. Okay? That's before rolling the toe and after rolling the toe, which looks completely different, all right? So my whole thing is not whether we're setting shoes back or we need to set shoes back or about dubbing the toe or rolling the toe. My lecture and my talk is about reading the tissue, starting to understand, look, the horn's super important. You guys agree? I mean, Simon Curtis just wrote a whole book on the hoof of the horse, and he's talking about the horn and the capsule. I think if we start to pay attention to these things and look at this stuff and have a reason to do what we're doing, we're going to help our horses. So I came in here with a question. Can they all come together? And the answer to that, I believe, is yes. I think they can. How much time we got? All right. Anybody got any questions? No questions?
What was the measurement to find the
From the widest part of the foot on a size 0 to a small 2 is 1 3/4 inches. And here's the thing, guys. All the people that are working our booth have all of these slides on a PDF. So anything you want to look at, I have 2 other feet, and they've got the process that I did in trimming each section of that foot. If you guys would like to see that, come by the booth, map a couple feet. We'll have a couple cadaver feet there as well for you guys to look at and start grading the distortions and help you understand and learn that. All right? Thank you.